Hey, curious people, you're listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast, where we explore our fascinating internal sexual landscapes and discover our authentic sexual selves. I'm your host, Patricia Rich, a certified internal family systems and sex therapist, coach, and creator of the Self-Led Sexuality model for healing, pleasure, and empowerment. I've spent the last 30 years helping people to develop fulfilling relationships with themselves and others. If you're ready for some warm, smart, and juicy conversations, me and my parts invite you and your parts to get cozy and settle in. Hey, curious people. I'm doing a solo episode today at the conclusion of season 1 of the Self-Led in Bed podcast. I can't believe it is now the end of the first season. And I've learned so much since launching 15 shows ago. I've learned so much about my own parts, first and foremost, about hosting a podcast, about the topics I've discussed with all the different guests that have been on the show so far. And I've also gotten to know who's listening. So the audience of this podcast is growing and includes therapists, coaches, people on their own sexual journeys, and other people who are just curious. And I've realized that some listeners know IFS like the back of their hand, and others are brand new to this modality and are asking, what the heck is IFS? So I thought for this final episode of the season, I would try to answer this and some other questions that folks have asked. And I hope this episode fills in some gaps and gets you excited for season 2, which will launch a month from now. And we already have some very amazing guests lined up, and I'm really excited for how the show is evolving. Okay. So, what the heck is IFS? This actually was an easier question to answer when I first discovered IFS in the 1990s, when it was squarely planted in the world of psychotherapy. But I will say a few things about it now and continue to say more as I move forward. IFS is short for Internal Family Systems, and it is a psychotherapy approach that has been around for over 40 years, and it's been used successfully to treat a wide range of different mental health issues, including addictions, trauma, depression, and lots more. So it's a psychotherapeutic approach, but it's also a way of understanding personality. And it offers a unique understanding of our inner lives and categorizes some different things that are in the world of IFS, kind of part of the internal system. And so it's a whole way of understanding who we are and how we operate. IFS is also a way of relating with ourselves and with other people. It offers some processes and ways to show up and relate that are based in compassion, humility, respect, and curiosity. So it's a psychotherapeutic approach, a model of personality, a way of relating, and it also is a wellness practice, similar in some ways to mindfulness meditation or yoga. It's a way to help us to center in any given moment and to live our lives from a place of confidence and belonging. And along the lines with IFS being a wellness practice, for some people, IFS is a spiritual practice. And it again offers that grounding and perspective and a way of being in our own place in relation to our parts and to the larger world. And for some people, it offers an expanded sense of connectedness and is used as a way to navigate non-ordinary states of consciousness. So IFS is a lot of different things. It's been evolving. It can stand on its own, or it can complement other methodologies for personal growth and for professional growth. And it's being used in fields as diverse as medicine, education, coaching, social activism, psychedelic healing, and more. So it has definitely been evolving a lot from its emergence originally. So, who invented IFS? Dr. Richard Schwartz, otherwise known as Dick, is the founder of IFS. When he developed the model, he was already a strategic family therapist and an academic, and he was working with adolescents who had eating disorders and with their families. And he was running into some roadblocks because even when there were productive family therapy sessions, he saw that for a lot of his clients, their symptoms were not getting any better. So things like restricting food, binging, cutting, and some of their behaviors were even getting worse. And so he tells stories of those times in his career and how eventually he just exhausted everything he thought he knew and the tools he had, and he gave up. And he decided to just listen to his clients with humility and curiosity. And as he did this, he became attuned to the language that they were using, and that they described having different parts of themselves that played different roles in their symptoms, such as a part that would feel intense self loathing, and then another part of themselves would try to manage that by being the best at everything, by exerting control wherever it could, such as extreme dieting, exercise, achievement. And the part might say that worked for a while, but at a certain point, that became unbearable too, that level of high control. And maybe the self loathing would break through anyway. And then the client might say, then this other part of me would have me binge. And when he would ask the part or ask the client to ask the part, what was that all about? It shared that it was trying to relieve the stress and tension in the system by consuming large amounts of food. So, after the fleeting relief of the binge, the self loathing part would often show up again, bigger than ever. And then that would make a job again for the controlling part, which would try to double down on dieting, exercise, achieving, and then the cycle would continue. So he was listening, he was hearing the language of parts, he started to listen and sense these were really distinct, almost like little people, different consciousnesses inside of his clients, and that when they were addressed and respected rather than just told that they had to stop or what they were doing was wrong, they started to share more about their intentions. And these parts typically would reveal a desire to protect the client from suffering or pain, or to prevent something worse from happening. And this is where Dick developed this idea of no bad parts, that parts all have a positive intention for the person. It doesn't mean that's actually what happens. The outcome of what the parts do can be harmful to the person themselves or to others, but the intentions of the parts are positive, and when they can be offered other alternatives and their fears can be addressed, they can relax, and that is when things start to change. So, in the language of the model, there's these very vulnerable parts, the parts that have taken on very intolerable beliefs, emotions, energies, often from trauma or from really difficult experiences for which the person didn't get support or help. So, in the language of the model, we have these exiles, which are the parts that carry all this toxic stuff. And then there's these protector parts that are trying to prevent those exiles from flooding the system. and also from being harmed. So, as Dick became a student of all of this internal family, not to be confused with it being like mom and dad inside, although there could be some of that. The internal family is just the group of different parts. One of the big insights he had was that what he had already learned as a strategic family therapist could be applied to the dynamics amongst the parts. He brought the techniques of family therapy to facilitating relationships amongst the internal parts of the client. And this started to bring some powerful results. And one thing that happened was that when the parts felt respected and heard, they could relax, and another quality would emerge. And this quality the clients described as feeling different from the other parts. And they said things like they would feel calm, clear, connected, curious, confident, courageous, creative, things like that when this quality would show up. And the clients called this quality, this is just myself. I feel like myself now. And Dick, being true to the language of the clients, started to call this quality self. So much how a child might feel in the presence of a calm and attuned parent, he found that when self was present, the parts felt secure and some surprising shifts and solutions could emerge. So, this source of self, and sometimes it gets called self energy, is something that kind of differentiates IFS from other models, which have parts. Lots of different ones have the idea of subpersonalities or parts or archetypes. But in IFS, we also have this notion of self, and that self can really heal and harmonize and relate with the parts and vice versa. And this opens up something very different. So Dick developed the IFS model and got lots of input from colleagues along the way who helped bring in different dimensions to it. And he started to write about it and to bring it to his professional community. And initially, he encountered a lot of skepticism. This sounded crazy to the academic world. And he was very persistent and courageous in just bringing this forward, writing articles, writing books, doing demos, presenting at conferences. And now, 40 plus years later, IFS has been recognized as an evidence based treatment for a variety of disorders. The research base is growing, and IFS is being applied to lots of different psychological and psychiatric problems. And it's also growing in popularity and crossing over into popular culture. People may be learning about IFS through podcasts and social media, books. And as mentioned earlier, it's being incorporated in so many different fields, professional fields and sports. Like, just it's a way of really working with yourself or helping clients to work with themselves in order to maybe have a more fulfilling experience or a better outcome with whatever it is that they're doing. Next question I want to answer are what are some of the key assumptions in IFS? So, IFS assumes that multiplicity is normal, that you're not crazy by having different parts of yourself, that we all have different parts and they each have their own distinct consciousness, role, sensations, and more. That these parts have a positive intent for our survival, that these parts have relationships with each other and function as a system, and that parts take on natural roles, much like organs of the body that have natural roles, and we don't really notice them when they're working well and everything's healthy. Our parts have natural roles and help us navigate our lives, and we don't really notice them. We tend to notice them when we're under stress, when parts get overwhelmed. And sometimes they get so overwhelmed that another assumption in IFS is that they take on or absorb negative emotions, beliefs, or memories that can get stuck in there. And these get called burdens. So our parts can become burdened, and that burden can become the filter for future experiences. So, for instance, if someone has an experience of being bullied, say, when they're young, and they start to feel like they are not cool, not a good enough person, that there's something creepy about them, or whatever it is that the mean kid said, they might start to believe that about themselves and see the world from that set of beliefs and feelings. So that's an example of a burden. And these parts can cause distress in daily life. And so other protector parts may try to push these burden parts away, like out of awareness, to prevent situations that might prevent these parts from even getting more activated. So these parts get called protectors that can try to prevent these burden parts from showing up or can try to douse them out if they do get activated. There's also an assumption that we have an indestructible self, regardless of the degree of trauma or difficulty we may have experienced, and that this self, this core self, might be hard to sense. We might not have any awareness of it because our parts might be so activated and burdened, much if you picture clouds that block the sun. Our parts can be like those clouds, so we don't really see the sun or feel the sun. But within IFS, we have some methods to try to help us notice the parts. I'll invite them to open up space so that we can also feel the sun and sense that self energy within us. And lastly, when self is leading, an assumption is that it can heal and harmonize the inner system. Our parts are still present, they're needed, much like maybe planets in the solar system, or like I said before, organs in the body. The idea isn't to melt it all just into one big lump, but to rather have a sense that there's balance and that these parts are in their own healthiest version. And they can actually serve as consultants to the self without totally taking over. So I know that's a lot. This is you might want to listen to that again. And there's also lots of books and things that elaborate on this more. But these are some of the core assumptions within that worldview of IFS. So, next question. So, how do you do IFS? There's a lot of different ways to engage with IFS. You could work with a therapist or a practitioner, and your IFS session might start out looking like a regular conversation. It might involve some listening from the professional and then helping you to kind of sense where there might be some different parts being spoken for. And maybe there would be some mapping, diagramming, just naming them in conversation. There might be some invitation to close your eyes and turn your attention inward and speak for what you notice inside. There can be almost like a little bit, almost like lucid dreaming. So allowing just imagery to form and to just maybe share what you're noticing inside. And the therapist or practitioner may ask you to do some things or make suggestions about how to navigate that inner territory, how to relate with what you're finding there. There's also ways to do IFS on your own, and lots of people start that way, listening to books, reading books, I should say, or listening to audiobooks or meditations. There's workbooks and things like that guide you to journal, to do some thought work, maybe some creative activities as ways to represent and begin to interact with your parts. And IFS also could be something that you engage with just using a couple of exercises or processes. in order to prepare yourself for some other activity or project that you're going to be doing, like before going on the air for a show or doing a sport or something like that. And possibly for preparedness before, during, and after a sexual encounter. So, next question I want to answer here is, what does IFS have to do with sex? Just as IFS can illuminate so many other areas of life, I have found that it can be helpful in many dimensions of sexuality. And those might include healing from sexual trauma, finding ways to notice what you like and to enhance pleasure. It might be ways to talk with kids or clients or family members about topics related to sex and sexuality. There's lots of different ways that I find that the IFS processes can be helpful. And I've also developed some elaborations, which I'll say more about in a minute. So, here are just a few ways that I think IFS can be helpful. It helps people to make sense of sexual feelings and behaviors that may seem to defy logic, such as, why do I not want to have sex even though I'm attracted to my partner? Why do I do things sexually even though I know they're wrong or I don't even want them? Why don't I know what I want? Why isn't my body responding the way that it should? Or why is it so hard to talk about sex? And why am I struggling maybe to feel pleasure? And maybe it used to be easier, and now maybe I have some pain or different things have happened and my body isn't doing what it used to be doing. IFS offers a way to just bring presence and curiosity to different sexual dilemmas or contradictory experiences so they can be understood and explored more. Another way IFS can help with sex is that it values what happens on the inside and not just specific sexual acts. So it helps tune into what I like to call our subjective experience of sex and not just the doing of sex. It also welcomes all parts, including those that may feel shameful, embarrassed, avoidant, or otherwise challenging. And it offers ways to get to know them better without judgment or without compelling them to change. We respect in IFS that parts have self-determination, so we can't really push them around ultimately, but we can help them to feel like they have a collaboration with us. So IFS also offers language for sexual communication that deepens emotional connection and intimacy. It can reduce fear, defensiveness, and shutdown. And it can just make it easier to talk comfortably about sex. So it's not that IFS offers specific sexual language, but rather the language of IFS can make it easier to talk about sexual topics. It also can heal underlying attachment wounds, creating a safer and lighter atmosphere for sexual play and connection. And it enables us to form a collaborative internal team that is represented by different parts that are important in our sexual lives. And it doesn't steamroll our parts that have concerns. It's not just like a tug of war. When we have access to this self energy, we can really listen and address concerns. And then when our parts and our system is satisfied with the safety of the situation and gives permission, we can really then let go. Those parts let go, I could say, or we let go. And that sort of allows for a level of release and sexual immersion that's really quite different than when we're in our heads and still haven't really fully entered the experience. Okay, Couple more things. I have been asked, what are the six S's of sexual self-energy? And I came up with what I call the six S's when I got curious about how can we recognize self in a sexual context. Like people would ask, how can I tell if I'm in a part or blended with a part or when I'm self-led in bed? And so the six S words, and you can get a free graphic of these at my website. The words that came to me were that self energy is safe, sensual, spacious, sensitive, steamy, and satisfied. So people can ask themselves, oh, is this S present for me right now? And if not, what's between me and that quality? For instance, am I feeling safe right now? No, I'm not. Okay, self energy is safe. So why aren't I feeling safe? And you might notice the outer environment isn't safe, or you might notice some parts activated that need a little attention before they can allow you to let go a little bit more. And it might be that it's not okay to let go. And so honoring those parts helps them to trust that we are a team with them. So these S's can help people to feel self energy. It can help to find parts. And also, it can, what I realized over time was that these S words actually flow in a sequence and can provide an erotic roadmap. So these S's keep deepening, and I have developed different programs and a curriculum and different things to help people to use these six S's to explore their inner worlds, their internal sexual systems. And for many people, it has allowed them to feel more self led in bed. So, next question. What does it mean to be self-led in bed? So, if we just pause a minute, I know I've just shared a lot of information today so far. So, just taking a minute to feel into how all that information is landing for you. And now I'll just say a little more that being self-led in bed means that we can be present. We're there. We're aware of our bodies, we're aware of our inner parts, we're aware of our partner or partners if we are with others, and we are in a place of choice and voice, and we can co create our sexual experience, and we are aware of the context that we're in. And there's room for creativity, for flexibility, and for some spontaneity, perhaps, in the experience. Of course, the outer world is not always safe. We don't all have freedom. There can be a lot of reasons people engage in sex that are not necessarily as expansive as some of the things I talk about. And that's part of life. And that may be what is needed or wanted or required. So sometimes it's even the recognition that, okay, like I'm not in a place to be able to maybe outwardly do or express everything that I want or would like to, but at least internally, I can be present to my parts and let them know that, let them know they make sense and that we may look for opportunities to express. So, the idea of being self led in bed is one thing, and what it looks like could be incredibly varied, right? So, it might look like taking the time we need to decide what we want to do, how we want to do it, and with whom. It might look like feeling lots of pleasure alone or with partners. It might look like having an honest and connected conversation related to our erotic life. It might mean grieving what we don't have and being present with what we do have. Being self-led in bed might look like protectors relaxing and allowing the body's responses to flow in a natural way without planning everything out in advance. It might mean respecting a partner's no while offering compassion to our own disappointed parts. It might mean ecstatic heights of pleasure and freely expressing that. Being self-led in bed might look like laughing, humor, experimenting, being messy, and it might at times look like a carefully designed scene that was created for the fulfillment of a particular desire. It could even look like accepting our own lack of sexual interest and learning how to be with that and be in accordance with that. So, the takeaway point here is that there's no one way to be self led in bed. It's a process, it's a moment to moment experience, and defining qualities are the sense of curiosity, choice, voice, internal connection, outer connection, and feeling a sense of authenticity along the way. So, another question might be, how can I learn about this? How can I learn more about this? First off, if you haven't listened to other episodes, you might want to start with the first one of the podcast, where I talk with Tammy Sollenberger about discovering the power of IFS. And you also might want to listen to some of the the episodes where I do some mini sessions, like episode 2 with Duran Young, where we address collective legacy burdens. And then I guide her in a little mini session with a part that came up for her in the conversation. And there's also a mini session on episode 7 with Martha Sweezy, who talks about shame and guilt in the sexual system. And she guides me in a little piece of work. So those ones you'll get a sense of the process. And other topics are addressed that might be of interest to you. So, this month off that I'm going to be taking will allow you to catch up on episodes you may have missed. There's also a free meditation available on my website called Taking a Few Beats. And that is good for just getting used to this pause and how to turn your attention inward. And that's available at patriciarich.com, Taking a Few Beats, as is the infographic about the 6 S's of sexual self energy. My website is also where you can find out about upcoming workshops, such as the Introduction to IFS Through the Lens of Sexuality, which will be launching soon. Some things you might want to do again during this hiatus before we come roaring back with season 2 is just noticing some things that are pleasurable for you each day, and maybe what parts of you show up before, during, or after a sexual experience. Greeting them, just noticing them with kindness and curiosity. So, those are the questions and some information and answers about what the heck is IFS and a little bit more about where I'm coming from with this. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone who's taken the time to listen to this podcast. All the people who've encouraged me, who've offered notes and suggestions, and who are helping to spread the word. So now that I've gotten launched and the podcast has gotten launched, the next step is spreading the word and even improving it more and more. So please continue to follow and share the podcast. And I know you will be excited about some of the folks who will be on the next season. Wishing you all a good month, and I will be back soon. Thank you for listening to the Self Led in Bed podcast. Check us out at www.patriciarich.com/podcast, where you can sign up for a free guide to the 6 S's of sexual self-energy. And if you liked this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time.